let's get started. First of all, I we talk a little bit about Processmaker just for the benefits of someone that might not have full knowledge about it, or somebody that is just getting into it. So on my screen, this is the Processmaker website, specifically the PM4 introduction, right? And this is around 2019. Basically, Processmaker had previous version before this, 2, 3, and I started with 3. I never really get to use 2. I started with 3 and now using 4, and it's a really big of a change for someone that has been using 3 to use 4, for bringing scripts, bringing screens, bring in a lot of components are decoupled, where you can reuse scripts, you can reuse screens, you can reuse a lot of things, you can plot charts with save charts, which are a lot of amazing features. And a lot of people tend to now think of Processmaker when they are trying to design a workflow and they are trying to go to market early. So basically it's a tool for process workflow, and at some point it grows to become more than that. Now you can use it to do business process automation, you can also use it to manage your business processes, and there's a lot of AI getting into it now that help you in a way to kind of like build process faster and go to the market faster. So I get the next question I will probably just want to address a little bit is why process maker? What's the benefit? And it's majorly two things for me personally. I mean, process maker will probably say they have a lot of reasons why somebody should use them and all. But for me, it's two things. One is getting to market as fast as possible. It is it is very critical, especially when you starting a product and you don't want to spend all your time trying to build an MVP to be able to test the market. And I know that there are some advice out there where people tell you that you don't even need an MVP to test the market. You can just send email to a couple of people. You can do that and that, which is fine. But sometimes when you are dealing with enterprise customers, they actually want to see something. They just don't want to see, and they just don't want to hear an idea of what you might build. They want to see at least a skeleton, or like a thing that give them the notion that this thing is going to get built. And in that kind of scenario, having just word of mouth might not be enough, and going all the way hiring a developer, especially if the startup founder is not a developer, hiring a developer, hiring a business analyst, DevOps, hosting your website, getting things in place takes time and takes money. And Processmaker give you the opportunity to kind of like design that in a very fast way. Your screens is there, you move things around, before you know it you have a form you can submit, you can integrate with a lot of other things. So for me, that fast tracking the point from when a process or an idea is conceived to market is a big game changer. The third thing for me is how process make sorry, not the third thing, the second thing definitely. The second thing for me is how process maker has evolved over the years. I can remember vividly when I started working with 3. It's more like a monolith application, and you can just put in jQuery in the screen. You write your JavaScript, and it's so difficult to debug, and for every process you have to create a screen. It was just like a whole endless cycle of a lot of things to do. And in fact, let me see if I can show what 3 looks like. Yeah, so this is the documentation for PM3. This is some of the documentation that it looks like, but it's really pain in the heart. It's really a pain. These are like, they call it dynaforms at that point. You have your elements and you kind of like mash them together to create a process. And this is like the documentation side for 3 before 4 comes into play. And the growth hindered, now things like AI, like I mentioned before, has changed a lot of things. The fact that most of the components are reusable. If I build a script like we are going to do today in this video, and I want to use it in several places, I can do that, compared to before where I'm building. Before I can do that, I have to build a plugin in 3. This is the official documentation for Processmaker 4, and this is like the landing page sort of for scripts. I will include these scripts in the video description, and here you can take your time to read through, but everything they talk about, or most of what they talk about, we're going to kind of like go through it through this video. And here they kind of like, they go through what a script is going to be, what the programming languages that are supported in writing the scripts, which is PHP, Lua, JavaScript, C#, Java, Python, and R. One important thing to note is scripts run in short-lived container for security, and I'll probably throw a little bit of background around this. So in 3, you can actually run your PHP code, your JavaScript code, you can run them right from your web form. The same way people can open a .html file and throw some JavaScript there, or people can write a PHP file, throw JavaScript there, throw HTML there. You can do that before in 3. And that's not really an issue, because most of the time during 3, people self-host the platform. So they kind of like have their own server, and Processmaker or Processmaker agency can come in and help them through the installation, and all their data live on their premise, especially because when I started using Processmaker, it was with the bank. And that was not an issue, because you are accessing your own data and you have only access to your data. But when Processmaker 4 comes, they bring not like it's new. There are some cloud option available in 3, but in 4, the one of the major selling points is the cloud option, whereby you don't need to provision your server or anything. Processmaker take care of all of that, and you pay for subscription. And in that kind of environment where you are sharing resources, it is very important that there's a recompartmentalization between each user's data. And when you think of scripting language, like PHP or any other of these languages that are here, they have the capacity to interact with the underlying operating system, and that kind of poses security, especially since your code or your data is not the only thing that's running on that system. So part of the solution to this is Docker. And when you try to run a script, Processmaker is going to spin up a Docker for you. So depending on the language that you select, if you select to write your script in PHP, they're going to spin up a Docker that already have PHP for you, and then the Docker will run, and it will return the response from that process. So in that way, it doesn't really interact with the underlying operating system or this computer. It's just running inside a Docker container. And here there's a sample process or a sample script video that you can watch if you want to. And that's it about the introduction to scripts. Now, what we build is this user list app. I'm not going to take you through the whole journey of trying to build it from scratch, but I will go through the process and show it to you. This is my process. This is what I want to use to show everything that I've talked about. So with this process, I'll be able to show you how to create and manage a script, and also how to use the script to call third-party API. I'll also show you how to use the script itself as an API. So this is a very simple process. I have a start event, right, which is the default because you want to get things started. I put the script before the form because I want to fetch the user data, then display it on the form, and then the end process. So this is all the process. This is just a very simple process. uh, think of it like there's a form that kind of like display all the users in the organization, and before you get to the form, there's a script that actually fetch all the users in the organization. Now, to the script itself, if I open the menu up here, and I'm going to open up the scripts and talk about the scripts a little bit. But before I do that, I'm going to show you how you would create your own script if you want to, because I already have a script created, but I'll show you how you will create your own scripts, and then I will talk about these scripts that I created. So on this side, there's this menu called script. I'm going to open this in a new tab. Then I'm going to create a new script. And here you can give it a name. Here you can select what you want to use. You can use C#, like I said, Java, Lua, JavaScript, PHP. You might not have access to all these if you are not on the enterprise version, but if you want to create an enterprise, if you want access to an enterprise version, there's a 30 days period. I will put a link in the description for you to register and get a 30-day access, and with that you can create an account and be able to perform this process. So you put your name, you put your description. Project is optional, and you can create the script. So I'll just call it test script, and I will say this is a test script, right? And I'm going to create this. Of course I have to select, so I'm going to work with PHP, and I'm going to create this. So in here I can write PHP code because I selected PHP. There are some other scripts that I've worked with that I use JavaScript, and it's more or less the same. There was even a time I some of my colleagues were trying to benchmark the speed of both PHP and JavaScript in this scenario. It's kind of like more like a closed, but that was just a silly thing to why we wait time then. So here, like I said, I can start writing my PHP code. In fact, you can probably just get rid of all of these in here. And before I go on, the script editor itself autosave. Here you have a couple of options. You can publish it, which is at that point it's not a draft again, and if you publish it, the script can be used in a process. This is some of their AI new tools that have come up. Generate script from text. I haven't had the time to play around with this, so I'm not sure how it works really, but maybe I will play around that and make a video about it. But one thing is you can always play around script here and see how it works. So in here I can write PHP code and say $name equals to Fred, right? And I can just say return name, just the regular PHP code, and you can run this. If you run this, you will see this button and it outputs Fred. And I can do some other things that are more complicated than that, and I can say what can I do? Age equals to 109, and I can say something like my name is just the regular PHP code you come in contact with every day. My name is Fred, right? And my age is whatever the age is, like this. And of course you can run this forgot a semicolon at this place. So I'm going to put it and I'm going to run this. And he output it and say my name is Fred and my age is 10. This place is driving me crazy, so I'm going to put a space here and run it again. But you get the idea. So basically in here I can run PHP code like I would do in any valid PHP server, maybe Apache or anything. And that's like the basics of what it is. There is sample input here which you can use to play around data. There's also configuration data which you can also play around. Maybe I'll do a different video around this, but this is a way for you to simulate data that might already be in the process that you want to use in your scripts, and you can play around it that way. So now that you have like a small introduction to scripts, I will go back to my process, and now I'm going to open up the script to fetch user data, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So this is my script, and this is a very simple script. The whole purpose of this is for me to get a couple of users from a dummy API. And if you are worried about this API, this is just a REST dummy API where you can play around, to get data. I will also put the description in the link, but this is it. You can use their API to get data. You can work with posts, you can work with users, you can work with comments, you can work with this. So if I click on this, it gives me this list of users, and that's what I'm using in my code. This is the URL, and I have this function that I call API call. Again, this is just for me to be able to have a clean code around this, because I want to separate the core to the API away from the actual code. But I could have just put it inside the same thing. Now I like to put everything inside script try and catch, because processes are sensitive and you want to make sure that if error do happens, you have a hold of them. If you don't put it in the try and catch, if any error happens, your process can break down. And if you don't have enough recovery process around your process, it's redundant, but I guess that's the word. If you don't have enough recovery process around what you've built, then if your process throw an error, that's going to be a big problem. This is something that I've experienced firsthand, and especially when your process is live, you can't tell a customer to try again after they've already submitted a form and your process run into an error, and that's going to be a mess. So you want to wrap all your script in a try and catch, so that at least some extent it doesn't blow up the whole process. And another thing is, it's also important to build your process in a way that even if there's error, you can recover from this. I mean, if you are thinking of process management in a bigger or broader term, you have to do more than try and catch, but I mean, this is try and catch also very important, at least from the code level perspective. So what I'm doing here is using Gozu, which is a PHP HTTP client. I'm using it to fetch the data from this URL, and everything that is going on here is pretty simple. I'm setting the header, which is setting it. I'm telling you that, okay, I'm going to give you application.json, which is the body of my request, and I want that back. I want JSON response back. I'm telling that I'm making a new request here. I want it to be a GET request. This is my URL and these are my headers, right? And the response is me using the Gozu client to send a request, and I'm putting a timeout of 5,000 because sometimes the Docker of Processmaker sometimes it's a little bit slow, so I'm giving it enough time to do what he has to do. And I'm just decoding, I'm getting the content of the response, which is what you would do normally. And I'm calling the API here, getting the response. I structured this a little bit to have a successful message data so that I'm able to handle it appropriately on the screen. So I'll be able to say, okay, if it's successful, I want this. If it's not, I want that kind of thing. But this is just like a fancy wrapper around the response, not a big deal. So of course I can also run this, I can run this. This script is going to run and it's going to get me this user. And if you look at it, I have my successful message data, and the data is what I have here. And if you look at my JSON placeholder too, you see that we have the same set of data. So it's basically just making API call to this endpoint. And I have Lenny Graham. And if I go back here, you can see that I have the same guy. Okay, so good news, our script is working. I'll go back to the process. So the script configuration, it gives you opportunity to pass data into the script. So I can put a JSON data here, and I can say name, right, is Felix. Now, if I pass this data, I can use config inside the script. So I'm not going to go into that now because this is specifically for APIs. You can use this data inside your scripts to actually run a request or make a decision based on the data that you are getting. A lot of things can happen. So that's what this script configuration is for. Loop activity, this is if you want the script to actually loop different, you can just loop ordinary, you can loop in multiple instance, multi-instance, sequential, depending on what you are trying to achieve. I think most of the time I've always used no loop and loop. And loop is if I want if I want the script to run a couple of times before the process move on. So I can say it should run number of times and when it should exit. And if you think about this, the use case for this will be if there are 2, 3, one or more activities that needs to happen inside the script before you display the data, and you can easily use for each in the script itself and run through this. But if you want, you can actually use the loop here to get the job done. You give it the number of iteration, and you also can give it the condition to kind of like exit if you feel like the loop should not happen again. There are really good use cases for this. I think I've used it once, especially when we are trying to generate a receipt. And sometimes the processor starts, but the receipt is not ready because the receipt is generated by a system that actually queue the process. So we continue to loop the process until we get a good feedback from the receipt generator, which is usually like 30 seconds. But sometimes the process starts way early than that. And, of course, you can also use a wait element, to kind of wait before the script starts, but that's going too much into that. So that's what loop is for. Error handling, I like this. This is super good. I love this. So you can set a timeout for how long you want the scripts to run, right? And you can also set how many times you want this to rerun, which is super good because there are some critical operations that even though they are allowed to fail, you still want them to go again. You want them to kind of like try over again. And you can specify how many times you want the process to wait before you retry. And for me, I always use the email notification. So if there is indeed a form of error, I want to be notified so that I can know that, okay, even though the system is trying to run the process again, I am aware of what is currently happening. And if I need to do something else, I jump on it. Okay, so that's enough about the script configuration, I guess. Then my task here, which has a single screen, like I said in the beginning, the purpose of this screen is just to display the users that we fetch with the scripts. This is the scripts. It's just a very ugly form, not that the CSS matter, but it will get the job done. So I have a user list here, which is a record data, and I set the variable name to data. And in here, I have the column ID, name, email, phone number, website. If you are not familiar with record, what it does is it take an array and kind of display the data in the array. So you don't need to loop or anything. You give it an array, you specify the columns and the variable details, and it's going to display it for you. So what you will do is look inside your array, go through each element and render these key values. And you can set, this is the ID, this is the value, this will be the column header, and this will be the value. If you want, you can give the header a different name, that will still work, but the value has to correspond to what your data is. And I'm working with this API, so I'm using ID, name, username, email, and that's why you can see ID, name, email, phone, website. So that has to correspond for you to be able to render it properly. Now, as regards the variable name, because I want the data that is coming from the script to render on my page, I'm using data, and data is what I give the variable that holds what is coming from the API. If I go back to the script here, you can see that here I said data, which is what holds the response, and the response is my data. So that variable name has to correspond to what you have here, or else the screen will not be able to interpret the data. So that's one. And the second thing on this screen is, apart from loading the data before the page loads, I also provide like an additional way for you to actually still load the user on the page. And for that, you need a watchers. So I have a watcher created here. In my watchers, I have this. So to use a watcher, you give it a name, you give a variable to watch. Variable to watch means if this variable change, I'm going to trigger this watcher. And I can do like a separate video on Processmaker watchers. They are like a whole thing on their own, but I'm just going to go through it, kind of like demonstrate what this is. So run synchronously means that I don't want you to do anything else while you are running this, right? I don't want you to run it underground. I want you to take control of the browser, and you don't have to do anything while you are running it. Run watcher on screen load. This just means like the moment the page loads, the watcher runs, but we don't want that. We are going to trigger it with the button by ourselves. So the source of my watcher, it can be a data connector. Again, completely different thing. But it can be your scripts, and right here we are using scripts. The script is fetch user, which is also the same scripts that we have used to bring users to the page. So that's about source. Input data, this is also like a way for us to pass data into the scripts, similar to how we could have passed it from the process that I showed earlier. And the script configuration, we are not going to do any of that because we are not using, we don't need to pass anything. But sometimes you might need to, especially if you need to pass a data from the process to the script to run it. Maybe you want to fetch a user's detail, right? And you need the ID of the user. In that case, you might want to pass the ID, then you will use the ID in the script. Then the output, this is important, right? This output, this is you telling the watcher that when you fetch this API, whatever data that you are getting back, help me put it in this variable. So that variable is what you now use to render the watcher, the data gotten from the watcher. And that's it about watcher, at least as much as I can explain it to demonstrate this. And here I have the second record, which is going to show the data that we get back from watcher. So if I preview this, you see users on page loads. This place, when we run the process, is going to hold the users that we get from the script before the page loads. And this fetch users button, if I click it, it's going to it's going to give us the user when the watchers fetch the users. And now that you kind of have overview of all the process, we've talked about this, the start event to start the process, the scripts, we've explained that, the form that will render the data, and the event. So now I'm going to run this process so that I will be able to just show you how this come together and how it works. So I will start the process, this user lister. I'm going to start the process. And if you can see, it loads it have this circular thing that go on telling me it's loading the process, and now it has fetched the user. So what happened is that if you look at our process, what happened is that the event starts, it fetched the user and it displayed the user, and that's why we have this. So this has run and it fetched the user. Now the second part is to actually use the watchers to fetch the user. So this has already fetched before the page loads or on the page load. So we are going to use the watcher to fetch it. So I'm going to click this. This is going to call the API, and boom, it's going to show the user list that is fetched from the API. So that's like I wouldn't say a quick overview, but that's like a in-depth run of how watchers work on Processmaker 4. We've been able to talk about the scripts, creating it, managing it. We've been able to use the script to call a third-party API. We've been able to render the data from the scripts on the page, and we've also been able to use the scripts to get data from a watcher. Now, before I wrap up, I think the last thing that I want to show is how to actually use a script as an API on its own. So if you do create a script, and I'm just going to go back to my designer and go back to scripts. When you try to configure a script, you can see a couple of things that are there, the executor of the scripts. Now, one thing that is new that Processmaker brought is the ability to this they call enable direct API access. So if I click on this enable direct API access, run asynchronously, it gives me an endpoint, and I can also put an authentication here so that the API is not just open-ended and anybody can call it if I want. But I'm just going, for the sake of this test, I'm just going to leave it open and we are going to test this out. So if I copy this link and I put it in my browser to call the API, and what you will notice is that we get back the data, and it's showing me a successful message, which is exactly what I configure my scripts to show. So now this is a game changer, because that means if you have a script that is doing a critical part of your organization work, you don't necessarily need to have like an entire new API to kind of like share that script with other people. Within your Processmaker, you can allow an API access and they will be able to call your API directly from it. We'll probably make a video as regards this to talk about this in depth, because this is like a game changer, especially when we started using it back then. But anyway, that's just a bonus tip. If you have a script that does good things and you want to share it with other party to use your API, then this will do it for you. And this wasn't possible before until recently. Okay, so just to recap, I hope you've gained one or two things in this video. I hope right now you are able to create your own scripts. You are able to use the script to call third-party API, and also being able to use your script as in a watcher and also as an external API. That's it. Cheers.